Welcome to tonight's edition of the Men's Room. Today we are welcoming Brian Abel, and he is a relational intelligence expert. But before we get into it, I would like to share that for those of you that are new to our audience, we want you to know that the Men's Room show was created as a space for men to feel safe expressing their emotions in a vulnerable way. It is a place where men can come to be seen, heard, and acknowledged without feeling judged or afraid to show sides of themselves that are different than society's expectations. We aim to educate, inspire, empower, and advocate. Please note that we are not licensed clinicians. We express views and opinions based on our individual experiences. Our stories are meant to inspire others and do not replace medical advice or professional guidance. And so what I'm most excited about tonight is to get into this very important topic. And to start things off, I'm just going to jump right in. So Brian, what got you started on the journey of helping others to navigate toxic relationships? And what was your main inspiration for wanting to do this work?
Well, first of all, Linda, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for providing this space to allow us to have these important conversations. I appreciate everything that you do, and it's a lot of good work that you're doing. But basically, my main inspiration and what got me started on this journey was it's kind of multifold. I have always been interested in mental health. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. With that, I went into the medical field. I went into emergency medical services, and then I went into nursing. So I didn't necessarily use my bachelor's in psychology per se directly, but I used it indirectly. So I've always been interested in medicine and healthcare. I'm currently a registered nurse working in mental health. But aside from the personal interest that I've had, really it was what really got me started on this journey and my passion to get the word out and to help as many people as possible who are dealing with toxic relationships and who have been in codependency patterns and just have a lot of self-defeating relationship behaviors that have been not serving them well, that they've had for a long time. It was a personal relationship that I had about almost 5 years ago. It actually started about this time 5 years ago. It was a very short but very intense relationship that I had with a woman who was narcissistic. She was narcissistic. She had a lot of narcissistic tendencies, and before that, we all hear the term narcissism, and we most of us have heard of it. We kind of have an idea of what it is. It's all these people who just they don't have any compassion. They're so selfish. They don't care about anybody else. He must be a narcissist. She must be a narcissist. But I really didn't truly know what the true meaning of narcissism was until I really got enmeshed in this relationship. And I'll admit, I come from an anxious attachment style. I come from a relationship history of codependency. It's something that I had to work through and that I'm still working through. It's a work in progress, but this relationship that I had lasted about 5 months, and it almost destroyed me. It was very intense from the onset. We got very close from the onset, and it started with everything seemed perfect, and I was the ideal partner, and she'd never found anybody like me before, and it was going to be totally different with me, and everything was great. But then she would, after the love bombing, she would start to push me away. So it's the idealize and then the discard. And it's a pattern that happens, and it keeps happening. And, one day I'm the love of her life. She wants to have children with me. She wants to marry me. The next day, I think we both have our own things we're dealing with. I don't think we should be talking right now. So I don't hear from her for a week. And I think it's over. And then a week later, hey, I get a text, hey, hope you're doing well. And the pattern starts all over again. So what this did was it created a kind of a push-pull, where I would be just really craving, almost like a drug. I'd be craving these intermittent scraps of affection that she would be giving me. I'd be waiting for that next hit of dopamine. And that's why the title of my book that's going to be coming out by the end of this year, early January to February, it's called Toxic Breadcrumbs. And that's exactly why I chose the title, because that's what happens. I was given little scraps, little breadcrumbs of affection here and there, just to keep me there, just to keep me at her reach. But then she could push me away whenever she wanted, and it creates this trauma bond that, like I said, almost destroyed me. It left me in a very, very dark place. It made me question, whether I wanted to live anymore. It threw me into a major spiral. And it took me about a year and a half to get through it, with therapy and a lot of help. And it took me a year and a half to get through to the other side. And once I finally got through to the other side, I realized that, hey, there's a lot of people out there that are going through this and that have gone through this. And I wish that I had someone like me to help when I was going through it. So that made me want to be the person that can offer assistance to other people.
That's really interesting, where you said that it was a relationship that started really quickly, got really close, intense, and it lasted about 5 months. And this on again, off again, hot and cold, always wondering when the shoe would drop, way to be. But yet at the same time, you were pulled into wanting to be cared for and loved, and to have this life with this person. And the thing that you also mentioned that I think is really important is the fact that it took you a year and a half to recover from this, even though, that's like almost like 3 times the length of the relationship.
Yes.
And what's important about that is that sometimes I hear, and you can speak to this a little bit, but you probably chose this relationship on some level.
I did. I absolutely did. I was attracted to her. I was interested in her. I pursued her. And if I hadn't pursued her, or pursued a connection with her, it probably would have never happened. So yes, I got into the relationship by my choosing, and I pursued this woman at my own risk, I guess you could say. And the warning signs, they pop up pretty quickly. But see, I was the type of person who, you said I wanted to be cared for and loved, but really, I was the one doing the caring. I was the one who wanted to do the caretaking. In a codependent relationship, it's you kind of push all of your other needs and your wants, and anything that you require yourself, you push it to the side for the other person. You don't take inventory of anything that you need. It's all about the other person. For example, with her, she had 2 young children. She was a single mother. I would do anything I could to help her run an errand. Oh, she lost her driver's license. Oh, okay, it's not a problem. I'll take you to the DMV. We'll get you a new one. Oh, you're short on money. Oh, hey, here's some money. Everything I would do. So I became what I like to call, instead of a human being, I became a human doer. I was putting my value into her hands. I was allowing her to determine my worth by what I could do and how helpful I could be. So, like, it became to the point where I would cancel my own doctor's appointments. I would cancel plans with friends just so I could be with her, and anytime, just so I could spend any amount of time with her, to get that extra, like I said, that extra dopamine hit, that extra hit of affection that I was so craving, because she would pull it away so easily. And I was in no state of awareness at all of what I was doing, of what was happening around me, to me, and within me, until after the relationship ended, and I was able to do a lot of reading and studying and learning, and that that's where I started to have my breakthrough. I always say that this was a lesson. I learned lessons, Linda, at 42 years old that I never wanted to have to learn.
Exactly. And I really like how you've taken us through this history of the things you experienced and how things played out, because if you are studying narcissism, which is a wide spectrum, people present in different ways. There's a lot of talk about how people that are narcissistic in nature will pick their people and target them and do all these things. And I think it's really important to know that it isn't always necessarily about targeting anybody or choosing somebody. It's what you mentioned midway through your discussion with me, is the fact that really what was going on was you wanted to give, you wanted to love, you put things aside because you weren't keeping a volleyball score of, I'm going to do this for you, you do this thing for me. You were openly giving, and that person was openly taking, as long as you were to do that. And you let the person in the relationship, this woman, define your sense of self-worth, because when you're outside of these relationships, when you find yourself in them, you probably defend people. You could make excuses for why they're acting. But the moment you can get out of it, it's kind of like, being in the ocean when you need to get out of a riptide. Same thing happens in these relationships. Once you get out and you look from the outside, you've done your research, you've had some discussions with maybe some professionals, you start to unravel the behaviors. And it isn't always the narcissist that was the problem. It was the two behaviors together. And so you have to own, well, I picked this relationship. I chose to allow this other person to define my self-worth. I chose to make excuses for someone that I wouldn't normally do for anyone else. And part of the healing process is to be able to forgive yourself for entering into this, and to learn maybe why you got into it, so you're not continuing the same behavior with each person you meet. And the same is true when you have that situation. Each person you meet from that day forward, you're always going to be thinking, is that person, in it for the right reasons? Are they out to get something? Are they telling the truth? And so it can affect even your future once you leave these relationships. So it really is quite the journey. And through the work that you've done, was there one tool or one thing that happened that took you to the place where you could define who you were without looking for that external validation or that doing? I love that, human doer. That's a great way to describe it.
Right. Well, and yes, there is, but I would like to expound upon something that you just said, where people like this, they choose us too. And I tend to be more on the empath end of the spectrum, and narcissists love empaths. They seek them out. They can spot them 100 miles away because they know that we have good hearts, that we care about people. Narcissists are not empathetic at all. They do not have an ounce of empathy. They will go through their life burning down everything in their path, their scorched earth policy, not caring for a minute about who it affects and how it affects people. So yes, we chose them, but they chose us too. And we were talking about, and we'll talk about this more, about how you have to get back down to figuring out, well, what am I doing to continually attract people like this? And that comes back down to your historical relationship patterns and these self-defeating behaviors and patterns that you have had for so long that keep you in relationships like this and that keep you drawn to people like this. And somehow the energy that you're putting out into the world is drawing these people to you as well. So I think that's really important to note, is that it takes a lot of, inner work and inner reflection to be able to figure this out. It takes a while to get to the point where you're able to do this. But what really helped me, and once again, it took me a while to get there, but was rebuilding my self-worth and recultivating a bulletproof sense of self-worth, because it's something that I didn't have. And if I did have it, it was just cut to the ground. So I had to focus on me. I had to step away and say, all right, who am I? What do I want? What do I need? What are my expectations? And the tool that I created, or that worked for that, that I created for myself and that I now, use to help others, it's very simple. It's just called the 3 lists. It's your list of wants, your list of needs, and your list of expectations. What do I want? I've never taken into consideration what I want. I've always taken into consideration what the other person wants and made sure that they have that. What do I need? Because you know what? As much as I didn't want to admit it, or I was afraid to admit it, I have needs that need to be met too. And I was finally able to bring myself to a place where I was okay admitting that. I was okay becoming vulnerable and saying, you know what, hey, Brian has needs too. And that's okay, because I am a human being, not just a human doer, right? So, and this whole vulnerability thing, it's actually, being here with you, this is a big step for me, because it took me a long time to be able to face what happened, to be comfortable sharing my story and becoming vulnerable. But I really had to stop and be selfish for a minute, and selfish in a good way. What do I want? What do I need? And what are my requirements? I like to call them my non-negotiables. What are my expectations? What will I accept in the future? And what will I absolutely not accept in the future anymore? As far as relationships, friendships, and by doing that, it not only adds to it builds a construct for you. It forms, it revalidates your self-worth, it rebuilds your self-worth, and it also creates boundaries. Boundaries are really important, because when I was in the middle of this, I had no boundaries. I had no boundaries with her. I allowed her to have no boundaries with me. She would step all over me. I would probably push boundaries as well, but it taught me to say no. I'm not going to accept this anymore. No, you know what? Hey, you're really nice. It's nice to meet you, but I think we'll leave it at that. So my 3 lists was something that came about after a long process, and it was finally at the tail end of my healing, which I'm still healing. It's still a process, but it was suggested to me that I make these lists, and they've been really, really helpful. And it's now the tool that I use to help other people, because it gives them a framework. It gives them a framework to put their life back together. Because, they say hurt people, right? And that's what happens, because one of my favorite quotes is, if you don't heal what hurts you, you're going to continue to bleed all over people that never cut you. So it's vitally important that we, as not only those of us that have been through something like this, but anybody who's been through anything traumatic, that we heal from it. And this is what has helped me heal, and that I have found to be most effective in getting through these relationships, is the renewed sense of self.
I absolutely love your 3 lists, and the wants, the needs, the expectations. I created something very similar.
Mhm.
And when I work with people, when I'm coaching, I talk about people expressing their values. And I also say that as a human being, you have a right to certain things. So one of the things a person could say is, I have the right to have an open, honest communication with everyone I'm in relationship with. I
Yes.
value integrity, sincerity, directness. And so when you're thinking about those types of things, and then you couple it with the communication piece, where each new relationship that you go into, whether it's personal, business, professional, any of those areas, then you're always going to express to the other person what you want, what you need. And then when things aren't going a certain way, how you want to work with the person to take care of that. So if you always have these conversations when you first meet people, that energy that you're talking about to the people that we might attract or the people that we're drawn to, as long as we're having those conversations, then nobody's going to be in that space where they are in that toxic, because they're not going to allow it to happen. So it's a non-negotiable.
Right.
And anything that needs to get taken care of, you're going to have the agreement with the other person to have that conversation. So I've done some work and entered some communities where people have been diagnosed with different disorders, so personality disorders. And I did that because I wanted to learn how they think, how they like to communicate, because at the end of the day, most of them have a trauma response because of how they were brought up. And so for me to understand that, and I can frame things in a certain way, even with people that may be hurt. And it doesn't even have to be a diagnosed disorder. It could just be a place in your life where you're really angry and upset and you're bleeding on everybody. Well, if you know a little bit about how to communicate the boundaries, because it's one thing to set them and know what you want, but if you're not communicating them, then there's no hope that you can have a healthy relationship. And just owning the fact that it's not your job to, correct somebody or to change them. And you can want to support them, because
Right.
I'm a supportive person and you're a supportive person. And so we can still be in that supportive space. But as long as we're working on the boundary piece and we're showing the other person in the party how to do it, the moment they don't show up and be able to navigate, well, then deal is over. We can't go there anymore, because it's not healthy for either person.
Well, what I've, and that's a really good point, but but here's the thing is that, like, you nailed it. People are who they are.
Mm-hmm.
You can't change people. Excuse me. You can't take someone who is who they are and change them into who you want them to be. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn, that you can't change people. You can't save people. You can't help people that don't want to be helped. And boundaries, self-worth, and then boundaries. The reason that boundaries are so important are because boundaries scare off toxic people. It scares them away. How do you avoid relationships with people like that? Boundaries. You set boundaries. It's gonna scare them away, because they don't want somebody who is going to uphold boundaries. And I learned that. And when you're finally seeing the red flags, and you're saying, okay, I'm seeing something familiar here. I'm going to set this boundary. Hey, this is what I require. I require emotional intelligence. I require someone who can communicate, someone who's faithful, someone who's truthful. I do not like liars. Someone that wants to meet me, match my energy. I set these boundaries, and you set these boundaries, and you're going to find that people who have toxic tendencies are going to run for the hills. So that's why I stress the importance People ask me, well, how do you help people get through toxic relationships and, the aftermath of that? And that's why I focus so heavily on cultivating self-worth and boundaries, because that's how you recreate yourself. And that's how, like, you rebuild the foundation up from the ground up and you become a different person. I'm a totally different person than I was 5 years ago. If I were to come across this person, if I were to see her or talk to her, which I haven't in 5 years, and it's not very likely that I will ever run into her, I'm a completely different person, and that's the beautiful part, is that, you can heal. It's, people who have been through this kind of trauma, and I do think it's trauma. It is emotional trauma. It's abusive, and there is a way through it. There is a way through it. At the time when you're in the middle of it, you feel like you're going to die. You feel like if you lose this person, you're absolutely going to die. I felt that way too. I was working so hard to hold on so tight, so hard to make sure that I didn't lose her. Because if I were to lose her, oh, my whole world would be destroyed. I would die, and that's the trauma bond right there. But people with narcissistic tendencies do not like boundaries at all. So that's why boundaries are very important, not just with them, but in general. You have to be able to say no. You have to be able to express what you want and what you need. And you also have to be able to have conversations about it. Like you said, if you can't express those needs and what you expect, the other person's not going to know. That's a really good way to find out very quickly if you're on the same page with somebody.
Exactly. You get to find out real quickly if you're on the same page. And if you're not, well, then the two individuals can part their way. I also like to share that the setting and communicating boundaries is also good for any relationship, not just one that may have something come up, but any relationship. You can have the best relationship with somebody by practicing these. And where it comes important is it's not about one person knowing this model and practicing it really well. It's inviting the other person in the relationship to do it with you. The amount of intimacy you can get from having these conversations with people and building the relationships is wonderful. And you talked about how you move through the relationship. After this, you heal. And I found that one of the best healing points is when you get your energy and your boundaries in check of who you want to be with. Once you have a relationship with somebody that's very healthy, that is not exhibiting toxic behaviors. Now you're going to, not everything's not going to be great all the time. You're still going to have disagreements, but you don't feel like you're going to lose that person so intensely. If you actually speak the truth and say what you want or need or feel, you don't feel, and your whole body can feel it. I don't know if you've
Exactly.
noticed that, but when you're in a good
Absolutely.
relationship, it feels good.
Absolutely. And that's, that's a great point. And that hits on something that that I focus on, is helping people go into future relationships and seeking connection with people intentionally, with thought and, and true intention, after having gone through something like this. Because once you're able to recultivate the self-worth, build boundaries, you're able to push those self-defeating relationship patterns and habits to the side, because they don't serve you anymore. They don't, at this point now, those don't serve me anymore. So I know that I'm now able to approach a new relationship with somebody, and like you said, any kind of relationship, but with authenticity, and do it with intentionality, to establish like true connection with people, because that's all we want, right? We all just we are human beings. Are we are social beings. We are on this earth to connect with other people. That's what life is about. It's one of the main things life is about, is to establish meaningful connections with other people. And those of us that have had struggles with that in the past, being able to get to a point where you have discovered a tool set and are able to define who you are and be comfortable with who you are and confident with who you are, and that nothing or nobody's going to change that, allows you to be in a position where you can seek out further connection in a more authentic manner. And that's how that's how I help people, when I'm coaching somebody or when I'm speaking to people, or I'm working with organizations, because that's the key.
So I have a question here. So in your work, when you're working with coaching of individuals or organizations, and you are talking to the whole how to have self-confidence and how to really step into loving who you are and having that selfish piece where when something doesn't feel good or right to you, that you just don't accept doing it. How does a man, because we're talking about the men's room show, how would a person, like, if they're not feeling confident and then maybe they have an anxious attachment style, it's like, what conversation points do you have to get them to a place where they can feel like they're confident in being able to voice things and that they feel good without somebody having to tell them? Because it's really easy, like you said, to get into relationship after relationship of the codependency. You find someone that really needs you and you want to help them, and then when maybe they get healthy, because let's say that happens, and then they don't need you anymore, then you're like, oh well, they don't need me anymore. And then you define yourself with self-worth on even outcomes of things. People tend to, if you're successful and something happens, you lose your job, then you're not, all of a sudden you're like, your sense of self-worth was tied up in that. And it's like, no, you're still the same person. It was just a circumstance that happened to you. What kind of conversations do you typically have to take a person that might be, maybe they're getting outside their relationship that's toxic and they're starting to see the ways? What else do you share with them, or strategies do you?
That's a good question. And what I like to do is I like to ask the question, and I find this with a lot of men, and it's really important because this is why I'm so appreciative of the work that you're doing, because a lot of people don't, they don't stop and think that men go through this too. And men are silent sufferers for so many things. Men are taught to, just to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, just, we're fine, everything will be okay. But what I try to do is I try to break it down for them and say, okay, well, let's take away the relationship, let's take away the job that might be gone, and what's the framework that we have left? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? What do you stand for? What do you value? What makes you happy? Do you even know what makes you happy? That's a big question, because lots of times the answer is no. I wasn't able to answer that question. What makes you happy? What do you like to do? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do on your free time? What interests you? So this is the way I look at it. The way I look at it and the way I approach people, clients, or anybody going through something like this is, I say that a story untold is a life untouched, really, and we all have a story inside of us, and we all have experiences. And sometimes we need to tell ourselves those stories and get back to affect and touching ourselves, touching our own lives again, instead of, sharing our story. Yes, we need to share our story with others so we can touch them and, help them. But, we got to break down who we are as people, as men, and not just how society views us, but, men with real emotions, men with real anxiety, with real stress, and that men that bottle things up to the point where they don't know how to handle it anymore. They, they have thoughts of, hey, do I want to continue? Do I even want to be on this earth anymore? So I find it important to get to the root of your story. Let's get to the foundation of how do what's the genesis of your story? Where did you start before any of these outside things came into play? Let's take away all the other variables. And by doing that and incorporating wants, needs, and expectations, it's able to recreate and reframe the outlook on life and who I am, and saying, okay, well, yeah, this is who I am. I've always been interested in this. This is who I was before she came along, or before the career came along. And it's about making that transformation back to who you were before life got messy. And life's going to get messy, right? Life always gets messy. But I think it's important to get down to the origin story of who you are, where you might have been hurt a long time ago. I mean, we all have something that happened to us somewhere in the past. Now, our origin story could be rejection, it could be abandonment, it could be different things. For me, it took me a long time to figure out, well, where did all this come from? Where did this feeling of abandonment, this fear of abandonment come from? I had a great upbringing. My parents, and I can say this, I had a fabulous childhood. My parents are wonderful. They were wonderful. They are wonderful. They're amazing people. They gave me everything I could have ever needed and wanted. But sometimes, despite greatest intentions, things happen. And I was able to pinpoint a moment in my early childhood where I felt like I was going to be abandoned. I was 2 years old and my brother was a baby. And my parents left us with one of those nanny services when they went on vacation. And I don't even know if those nanny services still exist. This was back in like the late 70s, okay? But I remember vividly this person that they left us with screaming at my brother and I, just yelling at us, treating us, just screaming at us, arguing with my grandfather because he wanted to come visit. And here I am, a 2-year-old, thinking, Mom and Dad left me with this person. Are they ever going to come back? Did they just leave me with this person? Did they abandon me? Because after that, growing up, I always had some anxiety about, hey, is Mom going to pick me up from school today? If she's a little late, I'd get nervous. So I was able to trace back my abandonment issues and my fear of abandonment in personal relationships that I have with women back to that. So that's part of what I like to do too, to help people, is let's get back to the root of this and let's reparent that inner child that's still young and that is still fearful. I think that's really important.
It is really important.
And I think that it's key in being able to move forward. And I put a lot of emphasis on that.
I was thinking about a lot of things as you were unpacking all of that, and you don't necessarily have to have something that's a bad upbringing to have that experience. It's just something that happened along the way that affected your attachment style or affected the way that you see the world. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about some exposures that I've had in my upbringing. And, I think it was me being just sensitive to certain things. So I was in a space where, you might see a person of authority bullying a student. That was a case that I remember very well. There was a girl that she was like a year or two older than us, and she came to our country, got put into a class where she was way older than everybody. And what I remember is English wasn't her first language, and she had to eat the food that the cafeteria had. And I just remember the teacher saying, you're going to eat everything on your plate. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, why should she eat everything on her plate? It's foreign to her. Maybe it doesn't make her feel well. And so
Sure.
I spoke up. And all throughout my life, I'd seen different people needing things. And so my sensitivity to how others are being treated is still very much here to this day. And so sometimes people can't speak up. And so, that's where that codependency thing could happen. You see the people that need you, and so you step up. But that's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing is when you get into these other relationships where you're constantly doing that and you're putting your needs second, and you may do things that for the other person, and that's how that can happen. And so you're right, getting to the root cause and recognizing what might be creating this pattern. And sometimes you got to dig really hard, because I also had a very good upbringing, great parents and all of that. And
But still, something in your past, Linda, could have created, despite the fact that we had great parents. My mom to this day still says, oh, all that stuff that you went through, gosh, must have been something that your dad and I did. And we always laugh about it. I'm like, Mom, Dad, you guys have been wonderful. Like, I don't, if it's something you did, I don't think it's something that you intentionally did. But, you having, this sensitivity, there's something that stems from somewhere. We're made up, the archetype that we are, that it's in our makeup, it comes from somewhere. And that's what fascinates me. And I think that's what really helps me be successful in helping people is, like we said, where does all this come from? Because if we can find out where this comes from, all of these patterns and behaviors that have been not working for us for so long, and to this day, I still struggle with it. I still have to be very cognizant of it. I have to be very cognizant of it, of what I've learned and what I know. And, I think you make a great point that, it's okay to be sensitive. It's okay to care, but it's all about boundaries. And when we create and cultivate a very strong self-worth and self-value, we're okay having boundaries. We're confident in our boundaries. We're confident in saying no. We're confident in saying, hey, you know what? I love you. I care about you. I can't do that though. I can't. No. So it's a very tough road, and it's a challenging, trauma is something that's very hard to get through. And, relational trauma is also, it's very difficult, and people don't realize that this kind of relational trauma is not just, it's a lot harder to get over than just a regular relationship ending, because, because it's so much more intense. And there's been a bond, a trauma bond that's formed that they say is more addictive and harder to break than a heroin habit, So when you have family members and friends say, why can't you just get over it? Forget about her. They have good intentions, but they don't understand. So, my goal, and I believe that your goal is, to be that person that understands and can, and can go forward and work with the people that we work with and say, I've been there. I've been there. I've been there where you are now. I see what you're going through, and I've experienced it. And this is how I got through it. And this is what we're going to do to help you get through it.
You really put that in a very nice way about letting that other person know that I've experienced this, you're experiencing this, and I understand. Because, like you said, a lot of times people like to say, well, why are you tolerating this behavior? Why don't you just kick this person to the curb and be done with it? It is
not as easy. It's not that easy.
No, it's never that easy, because, you could have a value that it could be learned too, that you work with people. If you communicate in a certain way, communicate your boundaries, say what you want and what you don't want, and you can do that, you can, keep working at it. But sometimes those, as much as you may see a potential to have it go forwards, sometimes it's just not in the situation for the other person, because unless they're wanting to work with you to change their behavior, then you're not going to get there. And it's okay to walk away from that, because it's not healthy for either person. The other person cannot change their behavior and get healthy, and the person that's experienced it definitely is not going to be healthy.
Right.
And so that's really important. And a lot of times people like to share their story. Well, this happened to me too. And they go into all of that because that's what we want to do, because we want to say we understand you, we see you, we hear you. But actually, the better thing for any of us that are coaching or counseling individuals on this is really to listen to that person, let them tell their story, and it's not our day to share our story. It's our day to listen. We're not telling them to tough it up and it can get better and things will get, on their way soon. That's not helpful to anyone.
No, I think it's important, I think you made a very good point that, our job is to listen, gather information, and, provide options and resources. Um, by saying that, hey, I understand, I've been there. Everybody's situation is different, so it's important to say, I know your situation is different than everybody else's. All of our circumstances might have been different, but I hear you. I've been where you are. I've been at that stage of the grieving process, and I see you, and we can help. Like I said, I wish I had me or you when I was going through what I was going through. And that was my main inspiration for becoming that individual. So that can, my mentors, they say that our purpose is the best of what we have to help others. And I truly believe that this is my purpose. This is the best of what I have. And this is how I can best help others.
I definitely see this as being your purpose, and the information, the stories, the education that you shared today, I think is going to help a lot of people to be able to move through these things, knowing that they can get better, and really, knowing that they can forgive themselves for being in these situations. And I just want to say, it's okay and it's expected that you're going to grieve these relationships.
Yes.
Because there's care.
You have to grieve it. You have to grieve it as a loss. It is a loss.
It is a loss.
It is a loss. But you can give yourself permission to, forgive yourself for allowing other people to treat you the way they treated you, because we do have to take our own responsibility, and we have our own role in this too, because we've allowed ourselves to be treated this way. But there's a lot of moving parts to why we have allowed ourselves to be treated this way. So it's okay to forgive ourselves. It's okay to be gentle with ourselves and be kind with ourselves, but it's also necessary that we dig back as far as we can and do a deep dive so that we can heal that part of us that is allowing this, so that we never again allow anything toxic into our lives. So, and I hope that this conversation today reaches as many men as possible, because, as a man going through this, there was a lot of stigma. Oh, you're a guy, toughen up. You don't need her. but men's emotions and feelings are very valid too. And we have the capacity to be deeply hurt just like anybody else. So I think providing a space for men to come and be vulnerable is really important. And the work that you're doing here, Linda, is really adding to that. So thank you very much for providing the space and for caring.
And I couldn't do this work without people such as yourself, who are very passionate about educating others so that you can be that person that you wish that you would have had, because that's what this is about.
It
And
is.
all of the issues that we talk about here on the men's room, they're not just men's issues, they're human issues. But where
Human issues.
Yes, they're human issues. And really, the reason why I can be a host as a woman is because as a woman, I can see things from a woman's lens and perspective. And if we were to have the same conversation in all women or all men, then we wouldn't really get to see the intricacies that can happen with how I might work on something and how you may work on something. In some cases, it'll be the same. Some ways it'll be different. And if we can work together in a society of men and women and have these conversations, I think we're that much better for it. And that's why I do this work every day.
No, and that's really important. And that's, and what you said is very important. I mean, as men and women, we need, coming together and working through this is really important. And that's why I've created, when I created my coaching program, I created one specific to women and one specific to men, because men and women are built differently. We process emotions differently. We react and respond differently. Our perspectives on love and connection are different. The ways we communicate and the ways we are expected to communicate are different. So that's why I have created two different programs, because men and women have different needs. And if we're going to help men and women, we need to take those differences, as much as there are similarities, we need to take those differences into account. So
absolutely. I think I'm thinking there needs to be a third one there. So you got your men's group, your women's group, and then you got your combined group as they move through this.
Absolutely. And that's hey, that could be a topic for another day too. So
absolutely. Well, it's been a real pleasure to meet you, to go into this valuable conversation. And I wanted all of our viewers to know where we can find you, where, if you're a man or a woman who's interested in attending those group sessions, where would a person find you?
Well, what I've done actually is I've created a special checklist for your listeners, and it's called my Toxic Breadcrumbs Checklist. And it's really easy to get. All you need to do is text the word toxic to 33777, and it will then send you a text. It'll automatically send the checklist to your email. You'll also get it automatically in the text. You'll get a link for it as well. And in that email, you will you'll get links to all my socials. I communicate mostly on LinkedIn, but you'll have my email contact, my Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram profiles where you can connect with me there. I'm revamping my website right now, so that's currently still in the works, but you can connect with me on LinkedIn right now. That is my main that is my preferred and my main source of connecting with people. And it's pretty easy to find me. You just look up Brian Abel, ABEL. You'll see me there. But like I said, text the word toxic to 33777, and I have a checklist for you that I hope will help you. Kind of make you think about some things. it'll give you some information about my upcoming book, and it'll give us an opportunity to connect further.
Well, you've heard Brian, so you go ahead and text him. You'll get all of the links to his socials. You'll get the checklist. You'll get access of when his new book comes out, which I will be buying a copy. So I hope you're going to sign it for me.
Absolutely, of course.
And we want to invite and encourage all of our listeners today to like and subscribe our channel and share these episodes out with your friends, family, coworkers. And we want you to do one more thing. We want you to actually join our Men's Room Show and Support Group on Facebook. So we're here on YouTube, we're out on Facebook. We are working on building our community so that we can go into conversations much like this, but without the recording. We're working on that. And last but not least, if you are someone that would like to be a guest on our show, or you know someone that would be a great guest for our show, then I want to hear about them. So you will send your interest in the show to youlearnfromlinda@gmail.com, and I will reach out to you just as I did for Brian, and we have a connect call. We see how we can come in together. So it's really that easy and that simple. So with that, we will see you next month on the Men's Room.
And once again, Linda, I just wanted to thank you again for providing this space to have these conversations and the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.